There was a different kind of rain at the Rock. The reign of Johnny Benson begins with a 3-wide Grand National finish. The heavy guns are firing volleys in the IndyCar war. And hail to the Trans Am titleist Tom Kendall, who's here live. Hello, everybody. I'm Mark Allen in for Pat Patterson. It seems like it's been do or die for Dale Earnhardt for weeks now as he looked to keep his slim championship hopes alive. Sunday, 100 miles was whittled off the AC Delco race at the Rock, and Jason Young tells us if it hurt the amount of action.
A number of drivers lead early in the AC Delco 400, including pole sitter Hut Strickland and Pontiac pilot Ward Burton. After a Derek Cope caution, points leader Jeff Gordon is out front. In order for Gordon to win the championship, he'll need to average a 15th place finish or better in the final 3 races. Dale Earnhardt will have to gain 69 points on the DuPont driver if he's going to win his 8th title. But just as Gordon looks to be unstoppable, a flat tire sends him to the pits and he drops off at the lead lap. Before he has a chance to make it up, Bobby Hamilton in the STP Pontiac starts a chain reaction crash which collects Mike Wallace, Michael Waltrip, Dale Jarrett, and Ken Schrader. A few moments later, and watch how hard this impact is, even with all the water barrels. Waltrip is okay. The other car is the 40 with rookie driver Shane Hall. Now back to the points chase. Earnhardt is the leader. Gordon is 3 laps down. Still they battle like it's the last lap. That's why they're leading the points. In the waning laps, with Ward Burton back atop the standings, a questionable call by NASCAR. They think Earnhardt's got a missing lug nut and force him to pit. The nut's right where it's supposed to be, but little good that does since he loses a lap. Then with 23 laps left, NASCAR throws an unprecedented caution to allow Earnhardt to get his lap back. He'll come in with the pits closed along with some others, but no penalties imposed. Then moments later, NASCAR lets all the leaders pit and allows them to go back to their original track position before the caution. This all takes more than a dozen laps and leaves only 8 green flag circuits left. Burton's still in front, and despite all the chaos, he goes on for his first Winston Cup win. Rusty Wallace is a distant second with Martin third, Labonte fourth, and the other Burton fifth. This is Jason Young reporting for On Pit Road.
And just a quick note of clarification, Earnhardt was allowed to pit because he had a flat tire even though the pits were closed. And there doesn't seem to be anybody but the Ward Burton team that's happy. A revised finish order as of 9 p.m. has Gordon 20th, and he says he should be 4 positions higher. The Earnhardt team finished 7th, but think they got shafted 3 spots. These very unofficial points have Dale picking up 43 for the moment. The margin is 162. Now check your local papers for the next couple of days because we may not have heard the last on this one yet. Have you ever seen anything like it? Now in the news department, it looks like Junior Johnson is about to get out of the car owner business. Brett Bodine is talking with him to buy the cars he's currently driving, but Junior will retain the buildings. This could mark the end of an era as Johnson has been a full-time car owner since the late 60s. Also, Richard Childress has tapped 2 people to fill the duties of departing crew chief Andy Petrie. David Smith gets that title, but will be assisted by engineer Bobby Hutchins. Now, one thing you've got to say about Johnny Benson, the way he's been driving and chasing the Busch Grand National Championship, he hasn't backed off even when it might have been prudent to, like at Charlotte. But his method has worked, and Saturday he wrapped up the title.
With all the rain in Rockingham on Friday, the AC Delco 200 is lined up based on points. Johnny Benson needs a 15th place finish or better to clinch the 95 Busch title. Beside him is Chad Little, who can do no more than give it his all and hope for a miracle. Troy Beebe has a short day in the 24 when he slams the wall on the backstretch. This is lap 4 and Beebe is done. Then on the restart, a chain reaction sends Kenny Wallace into the turn 2 wall. He too is done for the afternoon. Back underway, and there's a new leader. Jeff Green has the Goodwrench Chevy on the point with Mike McLaughlin in the 34 right behind him. Little and Benson are still in the top 10. But the hardest hit so far happens when the throttle apparently hangs up on Jimmy Spencer's Fina Lance number 20. Spencer isn't seriously hurt. Elton Sawyer is also collected, he continues. But yellow number 6 is the most significant all day because the car on the right side of the screen is Chad Little. He walks away from his battered number 23 and the title chase on lap 134. So Johnny Benson will be the 1995 Busch Grand National Champion in his second year on the circuit. But the biggest crash of the day happens when Green gives Doug Hebron a tap, and when the smoke clears, at least 8 cars are involved, including Terry Labonte, Dale Jarrett, Jason Keller, and Hermie Sadler. Everyone is okay around lap 172. But nothing compares to the last lap. Benson goes to the high side of leader Mike Wallace, but look at the car to the inside. That's Todd Bodine in the 72, and by some debris on the grill, he wins the AC Delco 200. Wallace is second, Benson is third, fourth goes to Ward Burton, and rounding out the top 5 is David Green.
So Benson can turn it loose at Homestead, but Little's now got his hands full trying to hang on to second. McLaughlin is closing fast. And one piece of news we reported a few weeks back, David Green made it official Friday that he will drive the Buzz McCall Caterpillar Chevy in 1996. We'll have an interview with the 1994-95 Grand National Champion a bit later in the show. Coming up next, IndyCar unloads a broadside at the new Indy Racing League when we continue. This year, besides Ernie Irvan's miraculous return to competition, has been the feud between the established IndyCar Series and the upstart Indy Racing League. Now, IndyCar has a 15-race schedule for 1996, the Indy Racing League 5. But the warfare, and that is the right word for it, is largely over the Indianapolis 500. The president and CEO of IndyCar, Andrew Craig, has been making the rounds of the national motorsports shows and joins us now. And Andrew, I think the first question that we really have to pose on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being a terrible relationship with Tony George and IRL and 10 being a terrific relationship, what number would you assign to it at this point?
I really wouldn't want to put a number on it. I don't think it can be measured in numbers. But certainly the relationship between the two parties is such that we're not really talking to each other right now. And obviously, as you well know, we're now preparing our own plans for our own future.
And obviously, one of the plans that IndyCar has revealed in recent weeks is running an alternate 500-mile race on the same day as the scheduled Indianapolis 500. Are we in a posturing position right now, or is this a legitimate, serious attempt to run an alternate race?
No, there's no posturing here at all. We have been locked out of the Indy 500. Our teams are not prepared to race for just 8 places on the grid. Going to Indianapolis is by far the most expensive race for us each year. It's very expensive, and to qualify for just 8 spots on the grid simply does not justify the effort.
Now, in recent days, recent weeks, IndyCar has published an 800 number that the fans can call to express their opinion. Today in the Indianapolis Star, Tony George, president of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and the driving force behind IRL, came out and commented on his position and some of the things that IndyCar has said, clarifying his side. It seems like the wick has been turned up in the last couple of weeks. Is there any specific reason for that?
Well, I think we've reached the point where we have to be very clear to our fans, who are the most important group here, and to our sponsors. We have to be very clear about where we stand and what we're going to do. We have tried very hard over the last 18 months to find a resolution. I'm sure the Speedway have as well. But the fact of the matter is we haven't found one. And now we have to prepare our position and look for the future. That does not mean we wouldn't look for compromise even today. But clearly we're not going to do that from a position of weakness. We're going to do that from a position of great strength.
What are some of the possible, obviously over 18 months you've explored different positions and have not been able to come to a resolution, but what are some of the things that IndyCar would consider positive steps towards satisfying their concerns about the number of slots in the 500?
Well, our principal concern is being locked out of the Indy 500 quite clearly. What we're prepared to do is to work with the Speedway to try and find a way to take the sport forward. I think the sport has moved forward very well in recent years, but you know, we're perfectly prepared to look at ways we could work together, perhaps build a combined schedule in some way. But what we're not going to do is allow the Speedway just to run the sport in an arbitrary manner, where the interests of the teams and the drivers are secondary to the interests of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
Now, we're looking at some footage right now of winter testing in Phoenix over this past year, and it brings up an important point as you go into 1996. Is there a drop-dead point at which time the alternate plans that you are now working on toward another 500-mile race on that same weekend in May have to go forward, or they can be cut off safely without injuring the reputation and all the logistics that have gone into preparing an alternate race?
The deadlines we face are really deadlines we will impose upon ourselves. There are going to be certain points in time where we'll have to make commitments to television and so forth, and obviously won't be able to go beyond those points. But we're certainly not drawing lines in the sand and saying if the Speedway doesn't do whatever by a certain point of time, we will do something else. That's not our plan at all. We are planning for our own race. We're planning for a future where the Speedway will be our competitor, and that obviously is a very different relationship to the one we have right now. But insofar as we can, and insofar as the deadlines allow us to, we're very happy to continue talking, or to talk.
Now, in the letter to the editor by Tony George today, he indicated that the word lockout is not accurate at all, that the positions are available, and that regular IndyCar franchised teams and those that run with IndyCar are not being locked out at all. Is this an issue of semantics, or is this a core difference of opinion about what the word lockout or something along those lines indicates?
I think that's an absolute sham. Anybody knows very well that our teams are being told, if you don't come to our races, the other IRL races, if you don't come to those races, you're going to have a very, very limited chance to race the Indy 500. The fact of the matter is that the IRL series has not proven to be particularly popular. The premise on which it was based has not been proven to be justified. That the Speedway finds itself in a situation with very few competitors and very little interest in what it's doing. So, as it hasn't been able to persuade people to join a series, now it's going to try the other approach. It's going to bully them into the series.
Got about 15 seconds left. If this alternate race does come off, and there is both an Indianapolis 500 and an IndyCar 500, what damage will this do to the sport of IndyCar racing?
Well, I don't think it's going to be good in the short term, but looking to the long term, I think a season where we could spread our races more evenly across the year, a season which wasn't so dependent upon the Indy 500, would actually be very good for the sport.
Andrew Craig, thank you very much for taking the time to come to Charlotte and visit with us. And the final edition, by the way, has extended an invitation to Tony George to join us to discuss the issues facing the sport. Up next, a double dose of late model action from two different series when we return. The other NASCAR Touring Series we've been talking about so far, Hal Goodson has a pretty comfortable lead heading down the stretch, and a low car count last night in Virginia helped make sure he stayed in front. Karen Pappas reports.
Local campaigner Terry Harris stuns those in qualifying, winning the pole, but he gets out of the right from the green as Goodson in the 16 paces the early laps. Jimmy Britz tries to take a shortcut through turn 1, and Conrad Burr loses some paint in the process, but no real harm done here. Near mid-race, Goodson is still in the top 5, and it's Rick Crawford who takes the point away from Ron Young, who had such a fine run at Nashville last week. Harris ends up in the fence for one of those few cautions, and this brings all the front runners to the pits. Strong-running Mike Cope comes out of 4th, but that won't last long as he moves toward the leaders. Top runner Steve Allison gets sidetracked after a Jimmy Britz contact, but it's the final 12 laps that have folks roaring. Number 80, Toby Porter, is leading, and Cope is right there. 3 wide, and this gutsy move puts the current series champ up front. Heading to the white flag, and Cope sends Burr a message coming off turn 4. The race will stay green, and Porter can't get the run off the final corner he needs, as Cope comes in and wins for the 4th time this year. Goodson comes home and takes 4th, with number 1 challenger Barfield in 5th. So in the points, with 2 events to go, Goodson still leads with a 142-point marker cushion. But 2nd and 4th are very much up for grabs. This is Karen Pappas reporting for On Pit Road.
All right, thank you, Karen. And heading into last night's Hooters Formula Cup, or late model race, I should say, the title chase was down to 3 drivers, one of them Dick Anderson ailing after a post-race accident 2 weeks ago. In the opening laps of the RC Cola 200, it's the Goodwrench number 71 of pole sitter Bobby Gill leading the way, with points leader Mario Goslin a close second. It's just what the doctor ordered for Dick Anderson. This first caution flies early and gives the Mopar driver a chance to turn the number 92 over to Dave Mader. Anderson is driving with, among other injuries, 11 broken ribs after a freak accident in Toledo when he was hit by another car in the pits. Back underway, and Goslin is doing everything he can to catch Gill when Tommy Nicola goes for a slide right in front of the leaders. This is yellow number 2. The best battle on the 3/8 mile DeSoto Speedway is between Jimmy Cope in the Miller number 15 and Mike Garvey in the 91. Give the third spot to Garvey. Back up front heading to halfway, it's still Gill and Goslin holding down the top 2 spots. Then just before the mandatory mid-race break, John Hollifield goes for a spin in turn 2. The yellow waves and it's out of the track for 7 minutes of service. And maybe that's not enough time for the Tracy Goodson team. Everyone else heads out while this team crashes getting ready for the second 100 circuits. On the restart for the second half, Gill isn't quite as fast. And then he's stopped after the engine blows in the number 71. Garvey gets into the oil and slams the wall. He'll walk away a bit shaken. This gives Goslin in the Budweiser-sponsored machine the lead. Then right in front of him, Tuffy Hester goes for a slide down the front stretch. Hester is able to continue. Jody Ridley gets the Save of the Night award with this wreck that doesn't happen, trying to get a lap back in the number 98. In the closing circuits, Goslin has a mirrorful of Darrell Shelnut in the 7. He's trying to find a way around, but Shelnut can't quite do it as Mario Goslin takes win number 2 in the Hooters Late Model Series and pads his points lead. Behind Goslin and Shelnut, it's John Crow 3rd, 4th is Russell Bearden, and rounding out the top 5 is Steve Christian. Now, when we left you last Sunday, we thought, and so did all the fans at the Martinsville Taco Bell 300, that Elliott Sadler had won the race and $25,000. But well after the event, Sadler was DQ'd because his cylinder heads didn't pass inspection. So that meant that Tony McGuire was the surprise winner. The original third-place finisher, Greg Marlowe, was also tossed. So here's a thoroughly revised top 5. Oh, those boys. Coming up next, we'll chat with David Green. And as we head to break, here's a look at the top 5 from Saturday's Unocal Pit Crew Championship, where there was a surprise winner. Stay with us. Scheduled this weekend was the rescheduled Busch Grand National North event at Lime Rock Park. But for the second time, it was washed away, and they'll try it one more time on November 4th. Now, we have the pleasure of getting to know the stars of racing on this show, and sometimes their public and private personas don't match. In other words, they're putting on an act when they're in public. But that is certainly not the case with one of the real nice guys in racing, David Green. On the eve of the Rockingham Grand National race, I spent a few minutes with him. David, your reign as Busch Grand National champion is about to come to an end here. Just one more race in the season after this weekend in Rockingham. What are some of the fond memories that you're going to carry away from your year as Titleist?
Well, probably top of the list would be the Nashville win. You know, not only was it a win in the Busch Series, highly competitive series, but, you know, it was back home for me. That's close to Owensboro where I grew up, and raced at Nashville every once in a while, but, you know, never got a big win at Nashville. And for the series to come back there for the first time in probably 10 years, I think, be able to come away with that big guitar, that's probably one of the highlights. And probably ranking right up there is to win the Busch Pole Award again for the most poles. We had like 4 at this point, hopefully maybe 5 or 6 for the years up here. And to do that again and get back into Busch Clash, and probably foremost and utmost was an enjoyable season as being the champion, you know. And it never really comes to my mind to somebody comes up and says it, you know, because I really don't feel any different, but it's got a nice ring to it, and I kind of like that.
When you go into the Busch Clash next year as the representative for the Grand National Series as having won the most poles, how are you going to approach it differently than you did this year?
Well, a whole lot differently, Mark. Last year we kind of went into it. It was my first Winston Cup race, period. Kenny Schrader jumped in there and kind of set everything up for us. But, you know, we kind of went into it just as newcomers. And this year we're going to go back with a totally different approach. Richard Childress has offered maybe a car to use, one of Dale Earnhardt's cars, and Larry McClure the same way with the Kodak team. So Chevrolet support with the engine and all that. We're kind of going into it now like a seasoned veteran, even though we're not. But, you know, that race is a lot of fun. CBS, national TV, a short 15 minutes, I think, to make a whale of a bunch of money. But just to be out there with those guys, and to be out there with those guys that's won a pole in Winston Cup, is like the best all-star race there ever was.
It's now official that in 1996, you and Buzz McCall will be together in the Caterpillar number 95 car. I would assume that your relationship with Slim Jim has been sensational. It's been productive. Everybody's parting company on friendly terms, and everybody's wishing each other well. But you have to be also looking forward to your future.
Well, I am, and like you said there, everything, a lot of people didn't understand. At the end of 95 here, it was the end of our deal anyway. We were thinking about trying to do it again, but, you know, everything in consideration, it was time to move on, and I think foremost for David Green is to try to move on to maybe Winston Cup or just go the next step. You know, I never realized or had a thought that we might be able to win the championship in 3 short years like we did. Maybe even 2 of them right there. We finished third the first year and won it there in 95. But, you know, it's time for a change, and the best part of the whole deal is the Slim Jim people have been great, and they were supportive of me moving on.
And in a moment, the craziest season-ending last lap we've ever seen. Stay with us. Came to a thunderous conclusion, and fans who saw it are still talking about it. And we think you will too when you see it. This is the last half lap for the win in the Pennsylvania 400. Now, the 84 will be Bob Seneker. The 48 is Joe Knott. And check this out. Oh, my. Now, you're going to be seeing this one a lot more on those crash home videos and the season in reviews. Now, Seneker was fine, and there were no hard feelings. Take a look at this thing in slow motion from the Turn 1 camera. It's every bit as impressive, if not more so, than at regular speed. Unbelievable. In the final ASA standings, Brian Refner did shatter any so-called sophomore jinx with the championship, and it's been quite some time since Mike Eddy has been this far back as 4th in the standings. The Western States Super Modifieds didn't have quite that incredible an exclamation point to their season, but the title was still up for grabs Saturday night, and Stephanie Boyd reports on this and the USAC Western States Midgets.
Going into the last race at Madera, Rebel Jackson and Randy Bauer were tied for the points lead. But as the field gets ready to take the green on this night, Jackson in the 11W has a 55-point advantage. Up front, Davey Hamilton in the orange number 1 immediately takes the lead from the outside pole. That is until Lance Tatro and Rick Veenstra get together in turn 4, setting off this chain reaction that brings out the red flag. On the second try, Hamilton still charges out front, with Bauer in the 78 moving into second, followed by Mark Ekberg in the 12X. Ekberg was fast qualifier earlier in the night and then went on to win the trophy dash. And he's way fast here, too, first picking off Bauer and then getting past Hamilton. With Ekberg checking out, a fierce battle develops for third between Bauer and local favorite Jeff Helton in the 11. Give the spot to Bauer for the moment. But a little later, when traffic gets in the way, Bauer gets stuck while Helton and Jackson both blast by. Next comes the halfway break to take on fuel and to do any tweaking except taking on tires. In the second 50-lap segment, Ekberg is still on fire, with Hamilton trying his best to catch him. Helton is trying to chase them both down when suddenly his wheel takes its own course and the car goes another. That brings out another red flag, and during the stop, Hamilton's car brakes and he watches the remaining 20 laps from the sidelines. In the final circuits, Ekberg, Jackson, and Jackson's car owner Dan Hayes in the 22W are the only cars on the lead lap. Bauer is a lap down in 4th, but by this time, Jackson already has the title sewn up. So for the last couple of laps, they all just settle in behind Ekberg, who's been totally hooked up all night and cruises on to make it 2 on the year at Madera. Jackson, Hayes, and Bauer keep it in that order, with Art Cervantes rounding out the top 5. In the final point standings, Jackson claims the 1995 title with a 74-point margin over Bauer. Helton, Hayes, and Brian McLeese are next. And in the USAC Western States feature at Madera, Hamilton had a much better night than his super modified showing. He dominated from lap 6 on to beat Billy Boat to the checkers, while Boat clinched the 1995 Western States title with 4 races still left on the year. For On Pit Road Final Edition, I'm Stephanie Boyd.
Now we'll have full race highlights of that Western States midget race this week on our preview show. Stephanie talked with the Supermod winner moments after the event.
Well, Mark, I'm here with another Mark, and a very happy Mark, I might add, too. Wow, this was your night. You won the trophy dash, then came out and dominated the feature. How'd you do it?
Well, we did everything as we planned, and my plan was to start where we started and be in the lead as soon as possible, and that way I could just turn the laps.
Looked like Davey in the first couple of laps had things pretty well handled. Did you think you were going to have a hard time getting around him or not?
I didn't think I was going to have a hard time with anybody. Not tonight.
Talk to me about traffic. How tough was it out there?
Traffic was tough. Some of the slow guys wanted to race side by side every lap. Every time I'd get to them, they were still side by side with the same guy I passed last time around, you know, so traffic was pretty tough. They'd get the move over flag, which is a courtesy deal, which is fine with me, but then one time they'd be low, and the next time I'd catch them, they'd be high. So traffic was tough, and sometimes I'd be up in the marbles going around somebody because that's where I'd already committed to go.
What about that halfway stop? Did you even touch your car, or did you feel pretty good about it?
We did a few little minor things to it all. We basically didn't do much to the car all night.
Nice name. Up next, we'll pull the curtain down on the World of Outlaws season when Final Edition continues after this. Up this weekend, Dave Blaney won his first World of Outlaws championship, but he was just one player in this final act of the season.
While Jeff Swindell won the World of Outlaws midweek event at Battleground Speedway in Houston, the 22nd annual Winners Nationals opened at Devil's Bowl Speedway this past Friday. On the first night of racing, the 55-car field rolled out with Steve Kinser starting inside row 2. Sammy Swindell and Andy Hillenberg share the front row. As the green flag falls, it's Sammy Swindell, the winningest driver at Devil's Bowl, to lead, but after one lap, the red flag comes out when Paul McMahon gets a tire down and flips. All of Sammy Swindell's hopes go up in smoke as his car breaks on lap 9. Sammy is done for the night. Andy Hillenberg catches the back markers midway through the race and keeps his number 2 car in the lead until lap 16 when Steve Kinser comes back to challenge him. Never, ever give Steve Kinser an opening, because that's all she wrote, and Steve Kinser takes his number 11 Quaker State Maxim to victory lane. Andy Hillenberg finishes second, Mark Kinser third, Danny Lasowski fourth, and Jeff Swindell comes in fifth. Night 2 of Devil's Bowl would be all right, at least all about Gary Wright. Steve and Mark Kinser share the front row with Andy Hillenberg and Danny Lasowski close behind in row 2. The secret to the race, however, would be the night's starter, Gary Wright. At the drop of the green flag, Steve Kinser takes the lead and almost gets into a crash as they come out of turns 1 and 2. Steve is in the lead, but not for long as Mark Kinser works hard on him and takes over that position. In lap 9, Gary Wright then passes Mark for second. Steve Kinser goes high, giving Gary Wright the edge he needs to take over the lead. Kinser and Wright battle back and forth. Wright bobbles a bit in slower traffic, giving Steve that edge that he needs to move back around him. But he won't keep the lead for long. A caution flies when Danny Wood spins out in turn 2. And Gary Wright goes on to win his second Devil's Bowl win. The first came in 1993. This is also Gary Wright's 4th World of Outlaws victory. And a new World of Outlaws champion is crowned. Dave Blaney went on to become the 4th different driver to capture the World of Outlaws championship just by showing up on Saturday.
Now, the Michelin Pro Rally season is heading down the home stretch, and like the other series we've talked about this week, the championship here was also clinched in the next-to-last race. Brrr, this is what it looks like hours before snowfall. Little can anyone predict prior to the start of this event that Paul Schwanier will break early and Carl Merrill will break while leading, which gives Schwanier the championship with 1 race to go in December. The win in this one, for the first time in his career, will go to Henry Joy and Christopher Griffin in a Mitsubishi, but they had to overcome a broken differential mounting bolt and a stalled car for 5 minutes. Even then, they won the open division by a huge margin. Second went to Bryan and Walden in a Saab, with Hurst and Bone in a Nissan third. The SCRA has been one of the mainstays of our show, and we've been proud to bring you their action this year. Saturday night, they went at it again in Ventura, California.
As the crowds began to gather at the Ventura Raceway, hometown SCRA favorite Corey Kruseman returned to the track, this the first time since his horrifying crash in Sacramento 2 weeks ago. This time, however, Kruseman returned as a spectator. Kruseman is recovering from an arm which was broken in 3 places, a hand which every bone was crushed, a skull fracture, and 15% vision in the right eye. He does plan to make his driving comeback at the Chili Bowl in January. Now, things heated up in heat number 2 when number 26 Scott Burns climbs over number 29 John Abashia and flips hard. The red flag is brought out to clean up things, and Burns, the only collision victim that evening, was uninjured. In the 30-lap feature, number 59 Mike Kirby and number 57 Ron DiDonato start in the front row. At the green flag, it's number 59 Kirby grabbing the lead with DiDonato in tow. Heading into turn 3 on the first lap, DiDonato shoots under Kirby for the lead, but Kirby snatches it back, at least momentarily. The first caution flies for number 92, Glenn Carson, who rides over number 31, Gene Manhire, sliding to a stop with a flat right rear. During the yellow, number 1, Rip Williams, goes into the pits with a stuck throttle and retires from the event. As the green waves, number 27, Ron Schumann, shoots into second, passing DiDonato. Late in the race, number 59, Kirby stretches the straightaway advantage over Schumann and hard-charging number 50, Leland McSpadden, who came from ninth to challenge Schumann for second. Remember, there are only 3 events remaining, and everyone's concerned about points. And it's Mike Kirby who takes the checkers and wins his third feature of 1995 with SCRA. Ron Schumann comes in second, Leland McSpadden third, Ron DiDonato in fourth, and Gary A. Howard comes in fifth. The next event is the Quaker State Classic on November 4th and 5th at Imperial Raceway in El Centro, California.
And right after this, we'll say aloha to the unlimited hydroplanes. That and much more when we return. Aloha can mean either hello or goodbye. Last Sunday, the unlimited hydroplanes tackled their toughest test of the year. It isn't exactly paradise on Sunday in the heats. A stiff wind creates troughs in the Pearl City Bay near Honolulu, and some drivers even question if the event should be held. But with 65,000 people on hand, the show must go on, and it does. The Miss Budweiser, piloted by Chip Hanauer, has to win the finale to win the season boat championship. Just like the championship driver he's been 4 straight years coming in, the Washingtonian conquers the conditions to give Miss Bud an unprecedented 5th straight title. The Drivers' Championship has already gone to Mark Tate in Smokin' Joe's because Hanauer has missed 2 events with injuries. Tate comes in second Sunday. Scott Pierce has a hairy moment when his Miss Outrigger catches fire on the course, but he gets it dockside, gets out, and the flames are extinguished with little damage. In the final driver's standings, Mark Tate wins his 2nd straight championship, with Hanauer a distant second. Vilwalk is a close third. And aloha in this case means goodbye. The competitors on the Bud Jet Sport Tour also got a wet one last time out last weekend in the unlikely place, Arizona.
It's the International Jet Sports Boating Association Scat Track World Finals in Lake Havasu City, Arizona, where riders from the U.S., Canada, Germany, and even Brazil were competing for the World Championship in 6 different classes. In the Pro Runabout 785 class, it's a drag race to turn 1 with Kawasaki-mounted Minoru Kanamori jumping ahead with Chris Fischetti and Chris McCluggage trying to keep pace. Here's a boat's eye view courtesy of Wild Bill Pointer. He'll finish runner-up in Moto 1, but he'll end up 10th overall at the end of the day. Up front, it's Kanamori, and he stays there for the win in Moto 1, and then he backs it up with a win in the second Moto for his 2nd World Championship in a row. Behind Kanamori, it's McCluggage second. Third goes to Brent Flambeurs, followed by Dustin Farthing and Fischetti. Throughout the summer's Bud Jet Sports Tour, the Pro Women's Ski class was dominated by Tara Lejo. And in the World Finals, she continued her dominance by winning every moto for her 3rd world title in 3 years.
Yeah, I had a really good run this morning on my Protec Superjet, and from there on, I just wanted to make a clean sweep of the day.
And you really did that. Christy Carlson didn't put up the fight you thought she would. Were you surprised, or did that really take a lot of pressure off it?
I was surprised Carlson wasn't there, but sometimes you have a bad run out there, and, it happens. And I was just, Lisa Wasik, my teammate, she was there the whole time, and just battled it out on the track, and I came out on top.
Lisa Wasik takes second, with Lisa Barsby, Christy Carlson, and Tina Martinez completing the top 5. In the Pro Freestyle class, Lloyd Berlew turns in a performance good enough for the 4th spot with a score of 48.4. And with this move, Rick Roy musters a 49.3 from the judges for the 3rd spot. But the freestyle man of the day in Arizona is Germany's Mark Sickerling. He scores a 49.5 and takes the World Championship riding a Kawasaki. Here's a look at the final rundown. Behind Sickerling, it's Brazilian Douglas Carvalho. Roy, Berlew, and Kenneth Wood fill out the top 5. Other winners include Chris McCluggage in the Pro Ski class. In Pro Runabout 1200, Dan Fitzgerald is the big winner. And in Pro Sport, it's Tom the Bomber Bonacci taking the honors.
Incredible. When we come back, we'll be joined by the new SCCA Trans Am champion, Tom Kendall. Stay with us. The SCCA Trans Am season was a few weeks ago, but the Sears Point race had enough excitement to keep folks talking through the winter. In our Rain-X Trans Am report, you already know that Tom Kendall won the series title, but he was right in the middle of a wild final 5 laps, and he's here now to talk about the championship and that. And Tom, that final race of the year with the Manufacturers' Championship still up for grabs, can you give our viewers some sense of how much pressure was on everybody that had a chance to help either Ford or Chevy win it?
Fortunately, the track is so difficult, it kept your mind off that once the race started, but leading up to it, the Ford drivers were in an okay position because it really wasn't too likely we were going to win. We had to sweep the top 3 places, which had only happened once all year. So we came up with a plan which got Ford's 1st through 4th, and then I think throughout the race, the championship switched back and forth 3 or 4 different times. And I'm actually glad I was busy because I would have, torn all my fingernails off worrying about it.
Why is the Manufacturers' Championship so important? I don't think some of our viewers realize how much that means to the big 2 in this case.
Well, Ford and Chevrolet virtually prop the entire series up. Unlike NASCAR, where the sponsors pay 80% of the car and the manufacturer pays 20%, our manufacturers pay 80% and the sponsors pay 20%. And it's because we race the cars that, the Ford Mustang in our case, that the people buy. And so those guys, when they're paying 80% of the bill, they say we want that manufacturer's cup ahead of the driver's cup. And so that puts the heat on.
You had one of the more interesting seasons I think anybody's had in recent years in Trans Am. Only one victory throughout the course of the campaign, and then a win that was taken away from you at Elkhart Lake. Yet you were among the fastest qualifiers at all times, and those extra points really did start to pay off toward the end of the season. Going into the 95 campaign, what was the game plan of this team to put the championship in their pocket?
The inverted start was the key unknown that nobody knew about, and we had a great year last year in qualifying, so it looked to play into our hands. Whether we liked the format or not, it was our job to look at it and try to maximize our chances. And so that meant really going for it in qualifying early on until we could figure it out and see if it would pay to maybe start qualifying further back so you could win races. As it turned out, our plan stayed the same, and we really went for the qualifying points and ended up with, I think, 40-some points just from qualifying.
I think an important question comes up because earlier this season there was an incident between you and Ron Fellows that they indeed penalized you 15 seconds, which cost you the Elkhart win. Then in that final race of the season, there were a number of stop-and-go penalties issued for contact on the racetrack. Some of it, from where we sit, from where the television viewers sit, appears to be incidental. Has the pendulum begun to swing to the point where the series is not letting any contact go on at all and they're giving up some of the entertainment value in the series?
Well, I mean, that's open to speculation. From my standpoint, and I think a lot of the competitors, it was told to us directly that way. At Cleveland, they said if there is any contact, the car that is overtaking will be brought into the pits. And it's really handcuffed you. Like even when I was coming from the back at Sears Point after my misfire early on, there were a number of times where I started passes and then stopped because I didn't know if I could get all the way alongside. And so in the past, you'd go for it, and if you were close, there might be a little bumping and so forth, but now you really feel like you can't even try it. And so it's really, I think, like I said, handcuff the drivers a little bit. And it's, whenever you put the black flag in somebody's hands, they better be sure, today showed that in Winston Cup when there was an error made, and we all make mistakes. So the black flag, unfortunately, there's no way to undo that after the fact.
What sense of satisfaction do you get from the championship this year? You won the Trans Am title, and that was the springboard to you going to IMSA GTP racing. Then the severe leg injuries you suffered, and your career has been on the mend and the rebuild ever since. So what sense of satisfaction do you get from being a national champion once again?
It's different. Like you said, last time I was using it as a stepping stone to somewhere else. Right now, I'm very happy running Trans Am racing. I still have some goals and aspirations, whether it's Indy cars or Winston Cup. But after all I've been through, just to be back with a top team like Roush and have a chance to win again, you know, all of them are satisfying. The most recent tend to be sweeter. It's nice to bring the championship back to Ford. It's been a while since the Drivers' Champion's driven a Ford. And I'm not in a hurry to go anywhere, unlike 1990, where I wanted to get there, win it, and get out. I'm happy to come back next year and defend it.
And you will be back in 1996 to defend your title. Of course, we wish you the best of luck at that, and congratulations at the 95 championship.
Thank you very much.
Up next, Ricky Rudd continues to chase that first elusive win of the year. Stay with us. Here that a number of teams begin to feel the pressure of getting a win before the end of the NASCAR season. Ricky Rudd's team is going through that right now. Now, despite a few rocky times this year, don't count this team's chances of getting a win before the end of the year.
When Ricky Rudd formed his own team for the 1994 Winston Cup season, everyone, including Rudd and crew chief Bill Engel, thought it would take time for the team to gel and be competitive. But by year's end, Rudd Performance Motorsports had scored 1 victory, 15 top 10s, and finished the season 5th in points. Almost unheard of for a first-year team.
You know, everyone has their goals, and they set those goals high. And we were able to reach those goals probably a little quicker than we expected to. And finishing up 5th in the point standings last year with a win at New Hampshire was, it was really great that we were able to do that. There was a lot of people that like the Tide folks that stepped up and put the financial support behind us. And it's nice to be able to reward those people with more than they expected.
Besides the new race team, 1994 was also big for Ricky and his wife Linda because after nearly 15 years of marriage, the high school sweethearts finally gave birth to their first child, Landon Lee. That means Linda now has a new job and has given up her 20-year-old position of recording Ricky's pit stops during races and most recently helping him run his new business.
I don't do as much as I used to. You know, I used to help Ricky in the work part, like here at RPM when we first got started. You know, I'd work the late hours with them, and I was really a part of it. But now I've delegated a lot of my, duties to, the secretaries, and they've done a good job. And it's kind of fun just being a mom and raising, our baby.
Ricky says Linda is invaluable to RPM because she's an incredible judge of character. He says in 20 years she's never been wrong, and that's what he counted on when forming his own team.
I depend on her a lot, especially like when it came to sitting down and getting a lot of these people lined up to come work at the shop. There's a lot of talented people out there in Winston Cup racing, but trying to mesh the personalities together is probably one of the most difficult things, and I relied on her a lot on the hiring process to make sure that not only we got the talented people, but we got people that could work side by side with each other for long term.
Rudd says keeping people long-term is how you win championships. And although 1995 started out with some disappointments, as the seasons progressed, the team has improved, and Rudd says they're moving ever closer to a title someday. If it doesn't come as a driver, there's always a shot as a car owner. But don't worry, with another top 10 finish in the standings possible this year, and many good years left, Rudd says his driving career is far from over.
It's not escape now. The weekend escape is to go to the racetrack and have fun. The hard part's coming back, sitting behind a desk, running the business, which is something that I've never been an indoor person, and now I'm sitting behind a desk running the business. And I think the only thing that keeps me going, doing that strongly, is knowing that the weekend's coming and we get to go racing. And so as far as the race side of it, I enjoy it more than I ever have.
But that may only be half as much as Rudd's fans have enjoyed watching him go.
And Richard Broom will take over the crew chief duties next year as this team and many others begin to look ahead. Well, that's going to do it for us this week, but be sure to join us for our On Pit Road preview show, which comes to you early in the weekend. We'll have more on that wild Winston Cup race and see if the points finish where they finished today. So come back next Sunday evening for final edition. Same bat time, same bat channel. Until then, I'm Mark Allen. Have a great week.